We're here because free speech is under attack. We're here because people are being convinced that socialism works. We're here because people are being judged guilty until proven innocent. We are fighting back with facts. This is not a safe zone, so buckle up, Buttercup. This is the raw, naked truth.
Impeachment charges against Mayorkas, NPR suspends editor that tackled bias, and more. Welcome to the Raw Naked Truth. I'm your host, Eric Lupkin, and here's the news you need to know. House impeachment managers officially delivered 2 articles of impeachment passed against Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer shortly after 2:30 p.m. on Tuesday. After delaying the planned delivery last week and pushing it to Tuesday, House Speaker Mike Johnson directed impeachment managers to bring the long-anticipated articles to the Senate, which will set off a number of procedural actions. The articles were initially passed in February, but the House held off sending them to the Senate until after the appropriations process was over. With custody of the articles, Schumer has urged all senators to be present during the week, as they will be sworn in as jurors for the impeachment trial on Wednesday. NPR has suspended veteran editor Yuri Berliner after he detailed his employer's absence of viewpoint diversity last week in a stunning rebuke of the news organization. Berliner penned a bombshell piece in the Free Press that criticized NPR's coverage of Russiagate, the COVID lab leak theory, Hunter Biden's scandalous laptop, embrace of the theory of systemic racism, and accused the organization of downplaying anti-Semitism following October 7th. Berliner also wrote that registration records in 2021 showed an astonishing disparity between Democrats and Republicans in the NPR newsroom, and said staffers didn't want to help former President Trump, among other things, to indicate an open-minded spirit no longer exists at NPR. Senator Marsha Blackburn is planning to propose new legislative action that would threaten to cut NPR's federal funding, prompted by the suspension. The Tennessee Republican is weighing a variety of legislative options to take on federal funding that goes to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which provides funding to NPR and PBS. The Supreme Court appears poised to toss obstruction charges against January 6th rioters. During oral arguments yesterday, the Supreme Court's conservative majority seemed concerned that prosecutors overreached in charging people who participated in the 2021 protest at the Capitol with obstruction under Sarbanes-Oxley, a law enacted to address white-collar crime after Enron collapsed. If the court rules that the charge cannot stand, it would impact the approximately 350 people charged that way for their actions on January 6th, at least 100 of whom have already been convicted and sentenced. It could also affect some legal claims against Donald Trump, who has been accused of the same crime. President Biden called for raising tariffs on imports of steel and aluminum from China, beginning what is expected to be a broadside of protectionist steps against Beijing during a presidential election in which trade is a flashpoint. Biden, who will discuss the tariffs as well as his intent to raise taxes during a visit in swing state Pennsylvania, is asking his trade officials to more than triple a key tariff rate on Chinese steel and aluminum products to 25% from 7.5%. That higher levy would be in addition to a separate 25% tariff on steel and a 10% duty on aluminum imposed under the Trump administration. A senior administration official said the higher tariffs would only affect 0.6% of U.S. demand for steel. Federal Reserve officials signaled a more sober tone this week, emphasizing that they're in no rush to cut interest rates. On Tuesday, Fed Chair Jerome Powell laid out his case for why borrowing costs could stay higher for longer than the central bank expected just a few weeks ago. Since the start of the year, Powell and his colleagues had said they were looking for more assurance that inflation was ticking steadily down. Instead, they've gotten the opposite. Inflation is going back up after the rate slowed, indicating yet another failure for Bidenomics. As a jury is being selected in the Trump hush money trial, Alvin Bragg may be turning out to be Donald Trump's biggest booster. The former president made a post-court visit Tuesday to the Manhattan bodega where clerk Jose Alba stabbed an ex-con in self-defense 2 years ago, a case that drew widespread outrage after he was initially charged with murder, with the former president vowing to straighten New York out. The Republican presidential contender stopped by the Santa convenience store, formerly known as the Blue Moon convenience store in Harlem, to meet with the store's co-owner, Maud Ahmad, and small business advocate Francisco Marta. During his trip to Harlem, residents swarmed out of their homes and businesses to greet the former president and express their support for him. The residents of Harlem, like the Georgians who expressed support for Trump in Chick-fil-A last week, are generally not interviewed by pollsters. That's the Raw Naked Truth. You can catch every episode of the Raw Naked Truth at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Audible, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech. We'll see you next time.